Sometimes the most extraordinary people walk among us wearing the mask of ordinary. They blend into crowds, speak softly, and carry themselves with a humility that makes you think they're just another face in the sea of humanity. But beneath that quiet exterior lies a story so powerful, so heart-wrenching, that it could bring the strongest person to their knees. What would you do if you discovered that the quiet woman sitting next to you in the military briefing room had already faced death 5 times for her country? What if her gentle smile hid scars that ran deeper than any wound you could imagine? What if everything you thought you knew about courage was about to be turned upside down? This is the story of a woman who appeared to be just another new recruit, fresh-faced and eager to serve. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind her modest demeanor was a warrior who had already earned 5 Purple Hearts, each one representing a moment when she chose duty over safety, others over herself, and honor over an easy way out. Her story will make you question what true strength looks like. It will show you that heroes don't always announce themselves with fanfare and glory. Sometimes they slip quietly into a room, take a seat in the back, and wait for someone to notice that they've already been through hell and came back stronger. Get ready to meet someone who will change how you see courage forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Bragg as Staff Sergeant Maria Elena Vasquez walked through the main gate for what everyone assumed was her first day. She carried a standard-issue duffel bag over her shoulder and wore the same nervous expression that marked every new arrival to the base. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her uniform was pressed to perfection, just like any soldier trying to make a good first impression. What none of the passing soldiers knew was that Maria had walked through these gates before, under very different circumstances. She had been carried through them on a stretcher 3 years ago, her body broken and her spirit tested by horrors that most people would never have to face. But that was a story she kept locked away, hidden behind a smile that had learned to mask pain better than any medicine. The processing office buzzed with the usual activity of a Monday morning. New recruits filled out paperwork while seasoned soldiers handled transfers and reassignments. Maria took her place in line behind a young man who couldn't have been more than 19, his hands shaking slightly as he held his orders. She wanted to tell him that the nervousness would pass, that the fear he felt now would transform into something stronger, but she remained silent. Next, called the clerk behind the desk, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes who had probably processed thousands of soldiers over the years. Maria stepped forward and handed over her papers. The clerk glanced at them briefly, then did a double-take, her eyes widening as she read more carefully. "Ma'am," the clerk said quietly, her voice suddenly respectful. "I think there might be some mistake in your file." Maria had been expecting this conversation. Her records were complicated, full of gaps and classifications that raised questions. Most people saw the clean, sanitized version of her service history. The real story was buried in classified files that only a handful of people had clearance to access. "No mistake," Maria replied softly. "Everything should be in order." The clerk continued to scan the documents, her confusion growing. According to the paperwork in front of her, this quiet woman had been awarded 5 Purple Hearts, had served in some of the most dangerous combat zones in the world, and had been medically retired from active duty with full honors. Yet here she was, standing in line like any other new arrival, requesting assignment to a training unit. "Ma'am, I need to make a phone call," the clerk said, reaching for her secure line. "Please have a seat." Maria nodded and moved to the waiting area, settling into an uncomfortable plastic chair. She watched as other soldiers came and went, each carrying their own stories and dreams. A young woman in dress blues hurried past, probably late for an important meeting. 2 mechanics discussed a problem with a transport vehicle, their conversation filled with technical terms that reminded Maria of her early days in the service, when everything was new and exciting. Those early days felt like a lifetime ago. She had been 22 when she first enlisted, full of patriotic fervor and eager to prove herself in a male-dominated field. Her family had tried to talk her out of it, worried about the dangers and challenges she would face. Her mother had cried when she left for basic training, begging her to reconsider and choose a safer career. If only her mother could see her now, Maria thought with bitter irony. She had proven herself beyond anything her family could have imagined, but the cost had been higher than anyone should have to pay. The phone conversation at the desk grew more animated, with the clerk speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Maria caught fragments of words, classified, confirmed. "Sir, you need to see this." She knew it was only a matter of time before someone with more authority became involved. 20 minutes later, Colonel James Harrison walked into the processing office. Maria recognized him immediately, though she hoped he wouldn't recognize her. The last time they had met, she had been unconscious in a military hospital, fighting for her life while he pinned a medal to the blanket covering her chest. He was older now, grayer around the temples, but his bearing remained unmistakably military. His eyes swept the waiting area and locked onto Maria. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, his face registered recognition, followed quickly by disbelief, and something that might have been respect. "Sergeant Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "What are you doing here?" Maria stood and came to attention, muscle memory taking over. "Reporting for reassignment, sir." "At ease." He gestured for her to follow him. "My office." Now, they walked through the base in silence, past buildings that held memories Maria had tried to forget. The base hospital where she had spent 6 months learning to walk again. The training grounds where she had first learned to shoot, before she learned what it really meant to pull a trigger. The memorial garden where too many friends' names were carved in black granite. Colonel Harrison's office was exactly what she expected: functional, organized, with photos of military units covering one wall and commendations filling another. He gestured for her to sit, then took his place behind his desk, studying her with the intensity of a commander trying to solve a complex tactical problem. "Your medical retirement was final," he began carefully. "Honorable discharge with full benefits. You don't need to be here." "I want to be here, sir." "Want and need are different things, Sergeant. After what you've been through, after what you've given, you've earned the right to a peaceful life. Why come back to this?" It was a question Maria had asked herself countless times during the long months of physical therapy and psychological counseling. The easy answer was that she didn't know how to be anything other than a soldier. The true answer was more complicated, wrapped up in guilt and survivor's remorse, and a burning need to prove that her sacrifices had meaning. "Because there are things I still need to do, sir." Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He had commanded troops in 3 different conflicts and had seen enough wounded warriors to recognize the look in Maria's eyes. It was the look of someone who had been broken but refused to stay broken, someone who had stared death in the face and chosen to keep fighting. "Do you want to tell me about the Purple Hearts?" he asked gently. Maria's hand unconsciously moved to her chest, where invisible scars marked each time she had been wounded in service to her country. 5 times she had bled for the flag on her shoulder. 5 times she had chosen duty over safety. 5 times she had earned the right to walk away, but never took it. "Only if it's relevant to my assignment, sir." "Everything about you is relevant, Sergeant. You're not just another soldier anymore. You're a symbol, whether you want to be or not." That was exactly what Maria had been afraid of hearing. She didn't want to be a symbol or an inspiration or a poster child for military courage. She just wanted to be a soldier, doing her job, serving her country without fanfare or special attention. "I just want to serve, sir. Nothing more, nothing less." Colonel Harrison studied her for a long moment, then reached for her file. "Your assignment request is for the training command. You want to train new recruits?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" It was a simple question with a complex answer. Maria thought about the young man she had stood behind in the processing line, with his shaking hands and nervous energy. She thought about her own early days, when she had been so eager to prove herself that she had missed important lessons about survival and sacrifice. "Because they need to know what they're really signing up for," she said finally. "Not the Hollywood version or the recruiting poster version, the real version. And you think you can teach them that?" "I think I have to try." Colonel Harrison closed the file and looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "Your assignment is approved, Sergeant Vasquez. But understand this, your reputation will precede you. These recruits will know who you are and what you've done. They'll look at you differently." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" "Because once this gets out, and it will get out, you'll never just be another soldier again. You'll be the woman with 5 purple hearts who came back for more. That's a heavy burden to carry. Maria had been carrying heavy burdens for years. One more wouldn't break her. I can handle it, sir. I believe you can. Report to the training command tomorrow at 0600. Your first class starts next week. As Maria left the colonel's office, she felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had gotten what she wanted, but she knew the real challenge was just beginning. Soon, a group of young recruits would be looking to her for guidance and wisdom, never knowing that their instructor was still fighting battles of her own. The sun was setting as she walked across the base to her assigned quarters. Other soldiers passed by, going about their evening routines, unaware that they had just walked past someone who had redefined what it meant to serve. Maria preferred it that way. She had never sought glory or recognition. She had simply done her job, even when that job required everything she had to give. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new responsibilities. But tonight, for the first time in months, Maria felt like she was exactly where she belonged. She was home point 3 years earlier. Staff Sergeant Maria Elena Vasquez had been a different person entirely. She was confident, ambitious, and absolutely certain that she could handle whatever the Army threw at her. Fresh off completing advanced individual training as a combat medic, she had volunteered for deployment to Afghanistan, eager to put her skills to use and prove herself worthy of the uniform she wore. Her first assignment was with the 3rd Infantry Division, attached to a forward operating base in Helmand Province. The base was a collection of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and sandbag positions that served as home for 300 soldiers in one of the most dangerous regions of the country. Maria arrived on a supply helicopter on a Tuesday morning, her medical bag strapped to her back, and her heart racing with excitement and nervousness. The base medic who greeted her was a grizzled sergeant named Torres, a 20-year veteran who had seen enough combat to know that enthusiasm was no substitute for experience. He looked at Maria's fresh uniform and eager expression with the weary eyes of someone who had watched too many young soldiers learn hard lessons the painful way. "Welcome to paradise, Doc," he said dryly, using the nickname that all medics earned regardless of their actual rank. "Hope you're ready for the real thing." Maria assured him that she was ready for anything, a statement that would prove to be both true and naive in ways she couldn't yet understand. Torres showed her around the small medical facility, explaining procedures and protocols while pointing out the various ways that things could go wrong in a combat zone. "The thing about being a medic," Torres told her as they toured the aid station, "is that you're never really off duty. When someone gets hurt, they don't care if you're sleeping or eating or writing a letter home. They need you right now, and they need you to be perfect." Maria nodded, absorbing every word. She had trained for this, studied every possible medical scenario, practiced emergency procedures until she could perform them blindfolded. But training scenarios didn't include the crushing weight of responsibility that came with holding someone's life in your hands while explosions echoed in the distance. Her first week passed quietly, filled with routine medical calls and preventive care. She treated minor injuries, dispensed medications, and helped with the endless vaccinations and health screenings that kept a military unit functioning. It was important work, but not the dramatic life and death situation she had prepared for. That changed on her 8th day. The patrol that left the base that morning was supposed to be routine, a presence mission in a nearby village where intelligence reports suggested no enemy activity. Maria wasn't supposed to go with them, but the unit's assigned medic had come down with food poisoning, and Torres was already committed to another mission. As the newest medic on base, Maria volunteered to fill the gap. "You sure you're ready for this, Doc?" asked Lieutenant Patterson, the patrol leader. He was only a few years older than Maria, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had already seen too much combat. "Absolutely, sir," Maria replied, checking her medical supplies one final time. She carried enough equipment to handle anything from minor cuts to traumatic injuries, along with morphine, antibiotics, and emergency surgical supplies. Everything she needed to save lives in the field. The patrol consisted of 12 soldiers riding in 3 armored vehicles. Maria rode in the second vehicle, positioned in the middle for maximum protection and quick access to any casualties. As they rolled out through the base gates, She felt the familiar mixture of excitement and fear that came with leaving the relative safety of the fortified position. The village they were visiting had been friendly to coalition forces, with local leaders who cooperated with military efforts to maintain security in the region. The patrol's mission was simple: show the flag, interact with villagers, and gather intelligence about any suspicious activity in the area. It should have been as routine as Torres had promised. The first sign of trouble came when they were still 2 kilometers from the village. The lead vehicle's radio operator reported movement on a nearby ridgeline, shadows that didn't belong in the sparse vegetation of the Afghan landscape. Lieutenant Patterson called a halt while the patrol evaluated the potential threat. Maria watched through her vehicle's small window as soldiers dismounted and took defensive positions. Everything happened with the smooth efficiency of well-trained troops, each person knowing their role and executing it without hesitation. She checked her medical supplies again, a nervous habit that helped calm her racing pulse. The explosion came without warning. One moment, the world was quiet except for the low rumble of diesel engines and the distant sound of wind across the mountains. The next moment, Maria's universe erupted in flame and fury as an improvised explosive device detonated directly beneath the lead vehicle. The blast was unlike anything she had experienced in training. It wasn't just the sound, though that was overwhelming enough to leave her ears ringing for days afterward. It was the physical force that slammed into her body like an invisible fist, the way the light seemed to bend and twist around the explosion, the smell of burning fuel, and something else that her mind refused to identify. Their vehicle lurched forward as their driver instinctively accelerated away from the blast zone, following emergency protocols. But Maria was already moving, grabbing her medical bag and preparing to dismount as soon as they stopped. Through the smoke and dust, she could see the twisted remains of the lead vehicle, now upside down and burning. "Doc, wait for cover," someone shouted. But Maria was already out of the vehicle, running toward the burning wreckage. Training took over, muscle memory and adrenaline combining to push her forward despite the obvious danger. The first soldier she reached was Corporal Jenkins, a 19-year-old from Ohio who had shown her pictures of his girlfriend just 2 days earlier. He was lying 20 feet from the vehicle, thrown clear by the blast, but unconscious and bleeding from multiple wounds. Maria dropped to her knees beside him, her hands moving automatically to check for vital signs while her eyes scanned for immediate threats to his life. He was breathing, but barely. His left arm was bent at an impossible angle, obviously broken in multiple places. Blood pooled beneath his head from a scalp wound that looked worse than it probably was. But it was the way his breathing sounded, shallow and labored, that worried her most. "Jenkins," she called, shaking his shoulder gently. "Stay with me." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Doc, what happened?" "You're going to be okay," she told him, the lie coming easily even as she worked to stabilize his injuries. "Just stay awake and talk to me." Around them, the rest of the patrol had taken defensive positions, expecting a follow-up attack that was standard Taliban tactics. The enemy would often wait for rescue personnel to respond to an initial attack, then strike again when soldiers were focused on treating casualties rather than watching for threats. Maria was so focused on treating Jenkins that she almost missed the distinctive whistle of incoming mortar rounds. Almost. The sound that had been drilled into her during training penetrated her concentration just long enough for her to throw herself across Jenkins's body as the first mortar exploded 30 meters away. The blast showered them with dirt and debris, but Maria kept working, using her own body to shield her patient while she struggled to control his bleeding. "Incoming," someone screamed, and Maria heard the whistle of more mortars arcing through the air. She had perhaps 10 seconds to decide whether to abandon Jenkins and seek cover or stay with him, and hope they both survived. It wasn't really a decision at all. The second mortar landed closer, close enough that the shock wave lifted Maria off the ground and slammed her back down beside her patient. She felt something hot and sharp tear through her left shoulder, but there was no time to assess her own injuries. Jenkins was going into shock, his breathing becoming even more labored. "Medic!" The call came from the direction of the burning vehicle, where other soldiers were still trapped. Maria looked toward the wreckage, then back at Jenkins. She couldn't save everyone, but she could try to save him. Working one-handed now, her left arm burning with pain, she managed to get N4 started and began pushing fluids to combat his shock. The third mortar was the closest yet, landing just 15 meters away. The blast threw Maria sideways, her head striking a rock with enough force to make her vision blur. When her sight cleared, she saw blood on her hands that wasn't from Jenkins. Her left shoulder was torn open, fabric and flesh mixed together in a way that her medical training told her was serious. But Jenkins was still breathing, and that was what mattered. The firefight that followed lasted 43 minutes, though it felt like hours to Maria. She treated 3 more casualties while under fire, crawling from position to position with her medical bag while bullets whined overhead. Each time she moved, her shoulder screamed in protest, but she pushed through the pain with the determination that had carried her through every challenge in her life. When the medevac helicopter finally arrived, Maria had managed to stabilize 4 wounded soldiers, including Jenkins. She had also used most of her medical supplies and lost enough blood to make her movements slow and clumsy. As the helicopter medics took over care of her patients, Maria finally allowed herself to acknowledge that she was hurt. The medic who treated her on the flight back to the base hospital was amazed that she had continued working with such a severe shoulder wound. The mortar fragment had torn through muscle and tendon, missing major blood vessels by millimeters. She would need surgery and months of physical therapy. As the helicopter lifted off, Maria watched the patrol site grow smaller below them. All 4 of her patients were alive, though their injuries would require extensive treatment. Jenkins squeezed her good hand weakly, his eyes clearer now that the pain medication had taken effect. "Thank you, Doc," he whispered. Maria squeezed back, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. This was what she had trained for, what she had dreamed about during all those long months of preparation. She had saved lives under fire, proved herself worthy of the trust her fellow soldiers placed in her. But as the helicopter carried them towards safety, Maria also understood that something fundamental had changed inside her. The confidence she had carried into combat was gone, replaced by a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to serve. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. 3 weeks later, she received her first Purple Heart in a ceremony at the base hospital. Colonel Harrison, younger then, and serving as a battalion commander, pinned the medal to her hospital gown while she lay propped up in bed, her arms still immobilized in a sling. "You did good, Sergeant," he told her quietly. "Your patients are all going to make full recoveries because of what you did out there." Maria accepted the medal with mixed emotions. Pride, certainly, for having done her job under the worst possible circumstances, but also a growing awareness that this was likely just the beginning of her education in the true cost of military service. She was right about that. The first Purple Heart was followed by 4 more over the next 2 years, each one representing another moment when duty demanded more than she thought she could give, each one adding to the invisible weight she carried, the burden of survival in a profession where not everyone comes home. But on that day in the hospital, receiving her first Purple Heart, Maria Elena Vasquez was simply a soldier who had done her job. She had no way of knowing that her journey was just beginning, or that the quiet strength she had discovered in herself would be tested again and again in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The road ahead would be harder than anything she had faced so far, but she would walk it willingly, one step at a time, carrying the hopes and trust of everyone who served beside her. 18 months after her first Purple Heart, Maria found herself promoted to staff sergeant and assigned as senior medic to a special operations unit conducting classified missions in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. The promotion came with increased responsibilities, a small team of medics under her command, and access to operations that didn't officially exist in any military records. The unit she joined was unlike anything she had experienced before. These weren't regular infantry soldiers conducting patrol missions in established areas of operation. These were elite warriors who operated in complete secrecy, striking targets that conventional forces couldn't touch, and disappearing back into the shadows before enemy forces could respond. Her new commander was Major Sarah Chun, a career special operations officer who had earned her reputation leading dangerous missions across multiple theaters of operation. Chun was brilliant, demanding, and absolutely ruthless when it came to mission success. She was also the kind of leader who would never ask her soldiers to do anything she wasn't willing to do herself. Sergeant Vasquez, Chun said during their first meeting, "I've read your file. Impressive work during the Helmand incident. But this unit is different. We don't get second chances, we don't get backup, and we don't leave people behind. Can you handle that level of responsibility?" Maria looked around the briefing room, noting the maps covered in red markings that indicated hostile territory, the weapons and equipment that spoke of missions far from any friendly support. "Yes, ma'am. I can handle it." "Good. Because your first mission is in 72 hours, and it's going to test everything you think you know about combat medicine." The mission briefing was classified at levels Maria had never seen before. The target was a high-value Taliban commander who was planning a major offensive against coalition forces. Intelligence indicated he would be meeting with other enemy leaders in a remote compound 30 miles from the nearest friendly forces. The mission was simple in concept. Insert a 12-man team, capture or eliminate the target, and extract before enemy reinforcements could respond. Simple in concept. Nightmare in execution. Maria's team consisted of 2 junior medics, Corporal Williams and Private Rodriguez, both of whom had combat experience but had never worked special operations missions. Williams was steady and reliable, the kind of medic who followed procedures exactly and never panicked under pressure. Rodriguez was younger and more aggressive, eager to prove himself, but sometimes too willing to take risks. "Listen carefully," Maria told them during their final briefing. "Special ops missions are different from anything you've done before. We're going to be operating alone, far from any backup. If something goes wrong, we're the only medical support these operators have. We can't afford mistakes." Rodriguez shifted in his seat, his eagerness barely contained. "We've got this, Sergeant. We're ready." "Being ready and staying ready are different things," Maria replied, remembering similar words that Torres had spoken to her what felt like a lifetime ago. "Stay focused, stay professional, and remember that these operators are counting on us to bring them home." The insertion went perfectly. The team rappelled from helicopters into a valley 50 kilometers from the target location, then moved on foot through terrain that would have challenged experienced mountain climbers. Maria carried her standard medical kit plus additional supplies for extended operations, the weight distributed across her body in a way that allowed for maximum mobility while maintaining quick access to critical equipment. The special operations soldiers she accompanied were unlike regular infantry. They moved like ghosts through the landscape, communicating through hand signals and staying constantly alert for any sign of enemy presence. Each man was a specialist in multiple areas, cross-trained to perform each other's roles if casualties occurred. Team leader Captain Morrison was a 10-year veteran of special operations who had conducted over 40 combat missions. His second-in-command, Sergeant First Class Jackson, was an expert in communications and demolitions who could call in air support or destroy enemy positions with equal skill. The team's sniper, Staff Sergeant Kumar, could hit targets at distances that seemed impossible while remaining completely invisible to counter sniper efforts. For 18 hours, they moved through enemy territory without incident. Maria found herself adapting to the different rhythm of special operations, the way these soldiers thought 3 moves ahead, and prepared for contingencies that regular units never considered. Everything was planned down to the smallest detail, with backup plans for the backup plans. The target compound was exactly where intelligence had predicted it would be. A collection of mud brick buildings surrounded by a low wall, situated in a valley that provided natural concealment from aerial observation. Maria watched through night vision equipment as the assault team moved into position, each soldier knowing exactly what they needed to do. The operation began at 0347 hours with a coordinated breach of the compound's defenses. Maria and her medical team remained in an overwatch position 500 meters away, close enough to respond quickly to casualties, but far enough back to avoid being caught in the initial assault. Through her radio, she could hear the controlled violence of the operation as the assault team swept through the buildings. Building 1 clear. came Morrison's voice through the radio. Building 2 clear, reported Jackson. Building 3, contact. Multiple hostiles. The sound of gunfire echoed across the valley as the assault team engaged enemy forces that intelligence hadn't known were present. What was supposed to be a quick capture operation had just turned into a firefight against unknown odds in hostile territory. Medic forward. The call came from Jackson's position in Building 3. Maria was moving before the transmission ended, her medical bag secured and her weapon ready. Williams and Rodriguez followed close behind as they bounded down the slope toward the compound, using the same movement techniques that the assault team had taught them. They reached the compound's outer wall just as the gunfire intensified. Maria could hear the distinctive sound of enemy weapons firing from multiple positions inside the buildings. The Taliban fighters had been waiting for them, turning what should have been a simple raid into a complex ambush. "Where do you need me?" Maria called into her radio as they took cover behind the wall. "Building 3, northeast corner," Morrison replied. "Kumar's hit bad. Multiple wounds." Maria felt her heart sink. Kumar was not just an exceptional soldier, but a husband and father of 2 young children. She had seen photos of his family during the infiltration march, pictures that reminded all of them what they were fighting to get back to. The run from the wall to Building 3 took place under heavy fire from enemy positions throughout the compound. Maria sprinted across open ground while bullets snapped through the air around her, her medical training warring with self-preservation instincts that screamed at her to find cover and stay there. She found Kumar in a small room where Jackson had dragged him after he was hit. The sniper was conscious, but losing blood fast from wounds in his chest and abdomen. His breathing was labored, and Maria could see the gray pallor of shock beginning to set in. "Hey, Kumar," she said, dropping beside him and immediately beginning her assessment. "Talk to me." "Doc," Kumar gasped, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. "Bad one this time." Maria's examination confirmed his assessment. The chest wound had punctured his lung, causing a pneumothorax that was compressing his breathing. The abdominal wound was bleeding internally, requiring immediate surgical intervention that she couldn't provide in a combat zone. She had minutes to stabilize him before he went into irreversible shock. Working by the light of a tactical flashlight, Maria inserted a chest tube to relieve the pressure on Kumar's lung. The procedure, which should have been performed in a sterile operating room, was conducted on the floor of a mud brick building while gunfire continued around them. Her hands moved with the precision that came from hundreds of hours of training, muscle memory taking over when conscious thought became too slow. "That's better," Kumar breathed as his lung reinflated. "Thanks, document." But the abdominal wound was beyond her capabilities in the field. Kumar needed a surgeon and a fully equipped operating room, neither of which was available in their current location. Maria started 2 IVs and began pushing fluids while calculating how long it would take to get him to a trauma center. Too long. The answer was always too long. "Morrison," she called on the radio. "I need immediate medevac for Kumar. He's not going to make it to extract." "Negative," came the reply. "Valley's too hot. Medevac can't get in with enemy forces still active." Maria looked down at Kumar, seeing the understanding in his eyes. He knew as well as she did that time was running out, but neither of them was willing to give up. She increased the flow rate and administered pain medication while her mind raced through possible solutions. "What about the landing zone on the ridge?" she asked. "If we can get him there." "Half a kilometer uphill through enemy fire," Jackson said, having overheard the conversation. "We'd never make it." It was Rodriguez who came up with the solution, demonstrating the kind of innovative thinking that separated good soldiers from great ones. "What if we provide covering fire while Doc and Williams move Kumar? Sergeant can call in fire support to keep their heads down." It was a desperate plan with minimal chances of success, but it was the only plan that offered any hope of getting Kumar the medical attention he needed. "Do it," Morrison ordered. What followed was one of the most intense 30 minutes of Maria's military career. While the assault team laid down suppressive fire, she and Williams carried Kumar through hostile territory on an improvised stretcher made from their equipment. Rodriguez provided close security, moving with them and returning fire whenever enemy fighters tried to position themselves to attack. The climb up the rocky slope was a nightmare of physical exertion and constant danger. Maria's shoulder, still not fully healed from her previous injury, screamed in protest as she carried her share of Kumar's weight. But she pushed through the pain, knowing that stopping meant certain death for all of them. Enemy fighters pursued them up the slope, forcing the team to bound from cover to cover while maintaining their grip on the stretcher. Maria found herself firing her weapon one-handed while supporting Kumar with the other, something she had never trained for but somehow managed to do effectively. The medevac helicopter was waiting when they reached the landing zone, its crew chief already preparing to receive casualties. Kumar was unconscious by then, his body finally succumbing to shock despite Maria's efforts to keep him stable. She continued working on him as they loaded him into the aircraft, knowing that every second might make the difference between life and death. "You did good, Doc," the helicopter medic told her as they lifted off. "He's got a chance because of what you did down there." Kumar survived, though he spent 6 months in military hospitals and was eventually medically retired due to the extent of his injuries. For Maria, saving his life came at a cost that went beyond the physical toll of the mission. During the firefight in the compound, an enemy grenade had exploded close enough to pepper her left side with shrapnel, wounds that earned her second Purple Heart. More significantly, the mission had taught her something about leadership that no training could have prepared her for. As a senior medic, she wasn't just responsible for treating casualties after they occurred. She was responsible for making life and death decisions under pressure, for finding solutions when none seemed to exist, for inspiring others to risk everything for the chance to save a fellow soldier. The weight of that responsibility was heavier than any equipment she carried, more challenging than any physical injury she had sustained. But it was also the source of a strength she hadn't known she possessed, a determination to never let her fellow soldiers down regardless of the personal cost. 2 months later, when she had recovered from her wounds and returned to duty, Major Chin called her into another classified briefing. This time, Maria listened with the confidence of someone who had been tested in the crucible of combat leadership and proven herself worthy of the trust placed in her. She had no way of knowing that her greatest challenges still lay ahead, that the lessons learned during Kumar's rescue were just preparation for trials that would test everything she believed about duty, sacrifice, and the true meaning of military service. But she was ready for whatever came next. The quiet young woman who had volunteered for deployment 18 months earlier was gone, replaced by a combat-tested leader who understood that some things were worth any sacrifice, even if that sacrifice included everything she had to give.